put in all this time and effort and budget to go to the event. Tell us about Speed to Lead, what you guys are doing to take advantage of everybody that you met and how you act on them quickly.
You're still at the conference. You're right there. So if you're talking to somebody and you have a connection, think they could be a really great customer, keep them involved as much as possible, right? Get them while they're there, start to build that relationship. And there again, like having those notes in Popl, right? Make it really easy at the end of the day. For most companies, they have to enrich their list and they do all this. And then you hear from companies 3 to 7 days after the conference. And so this is your opportunity to have that primacy effect and make that first impression with people and reinforce that mental hook into your company.
What's up, networkers? Welcome back to another episode of the Networker Podcast, your home for all the best insights and advice on all things conferences, trade shows, and networking.
We're your hosts, Bryce, Alsten, and Ryan Alco. Join us as we network with events industry professionals to discuss the art of building meaningful connections that fuel your business growth and unlock opportunity.
Now, without further ado, put on your conference badge and let's dive in to today's episode.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Networker Podcast. Today, our guest is Paul Smith. Paul is the Director of Marketing at Kuali. Kuali provides cloud-based software solutions tailored for higher education institutions, helping them manage finances, research administration, curriculum, and student services efficiently. Paul is also former Apple, where he helped develop the Apple Teacher Certification Program as the Senior Global Marketing Programs Manager there. Paul is a seasoned trade show expert with many years of experience, and in today's episode, he unveils his time-tested strategies for winning at conferences, maximizing pipeline value, and structuring high-performing conference marketing teams, all while making lifetime memories in the process. Now, without further ado, let's get into today's episode. Paul, thank you for joining us. It's a pleasure. We got the chance to speak to you a few weeks ago, and we identified you as one of our top Popl users, you and your team, getting a lot of great usage, capturing leads, going to conferences, using all of the different features. And so we're really excited to have you on the Networker Podcast today to share some tips, tricks, and advice on how to be successful before, during, and after conferences. So welcome to the show, Paul.
Yeah, thanks. Excited to be here. Love talking about Popl, to anybody who's interested, and love talking about conferences. So yeah, happy to be here.
Amazing. So before we get into the nitty gritty, I want to ask you, why do you attend conferences and trade shows, and what are you guys looking to get out of them?
So in higher education, and I think this is probably true in a lot of sectors, our customers are just inundated with nurture campaigns, outreach, SDRs out there doing their best on LinkedIn, so conferences are really emerging as a critical part of our lead gen pipeline. They are just our best source of high quality leads that we have. And I see that that trend continuing as we continue in years to come.
Do you think that that's a function of all of the digital AI presence, outbound tools, sales tools that are kind of becoming ubiquitous around us?
I do. I think companies, MarTech is it's so hard to keep up, right? Just with you all, right? It's just changing so fast that, and it's getting so good that for the customer, it's becoming extremely difficult to discern what's real, right? And now we've got Benioff doing, AI sales reps, right? And everything in between, CS teams being taken over by AI. So there is, the need for products and services doesn't go away, but it's getting harder for customers to really discern what's real and what's smoke and mirrors. So I see a lot more interest and engagement at conferences. And I think over time, attendance will continue to improve.
Yeah. The in-person aspect of conferences is immensely valuable. And, as AI obviously going to continue to advance and develop, but it's going to be hard to replace some level of in-person engagement and connection.
No question. And the thing is like, again, like as AI becomes more ubiquitous in our lives and starts to really kind of embed itself in our daily processes, and especially, since work from home, and I know a lot of people are pushing return to office, there's still a huge segment of the population that is working from home office. And so there's a real desire to go out and network and meet people and have that analog experience. Yeah, for sure.
Breath of fresh air. Yeah.
So, Paul, it makes sense why you guys go to conferences and the value they're looking to get from those. As Bryce mentioned, we like to see the conferences and break them down into 3 parts: before the conference, during it, and after. And let's start with before the conference. And so, curious to get your perspective. How do you decide which conferences to attend, and what kind of planning do you do upcoming to the conference?
That's a good question. It's hard because there are so many, right? And you've got limited budget, and conferences are expensive way to get leads, but it's also, how you get the most leads and the highest quality leads. And beyond the leads, the branding exercise, right? A lot of these conferences, you just have to be there. In every industry, there's like one trade show where if you're not there, it's like you don't exist. People are wondering, did they go out of business? Like what's going on? So it's interesting for us because as a higher ed company, we actually have 5 different products that we sell to like 5 different segments inside higher education. And each of the segments has their own big conference of the year. So for example, in the tech community for IT directors and CIOs, they have a conference called EDUCAUSE. Got to be at that one, right? And then for your research administrators in the research community, they have Incura, right? They have SRAI. So there's conferences that we have to go to. But when I think back to my K-12 days, when I think back to, a more typical situation where you've got one sector that you're playing in, the question for me is like, it really comes down to ROI, right? So you're looking at attendance, you're looking at attendees. Is there a high concentration of your target persona that's going to be there? And so there's a lot of back and forth that I have with the conference organizer and ask them some tough questions, right? And they'll give me a number. It's always, probably if somewhere in the realm of like 2 to 3% higher than who is actually going to be there. So I always shave off the number they give me. So if they say there's going to be 10,000 people, I know there's only going to be like, 9,500, 9,000 people there. So you get the raw numbers, you identify the persona, and then you try to figure out like what's happening at that conference, right? Is it something that is going to provide a platform for your programs, right? Your initiatives? If you have a product launch going, is there a conference that is timed well with a product launch where you can leverage that conference, maybe get a press suite, right? And have some reporters come in to get like an exclusive opportunity to get first look at. So those are some of but it's really, it's going to be different for every company, really, kind of where you're at. I don't know. Was that a good answer to your question?
That absolutely makes sense. And I just have to say, we knew you were an expert in trade shows, but we didn't know you'd been doing this since K through 12.
Yeah, it's funny. I like to say that I graduated from K-12 and up into higher education finally. But yeah, for most of my career, I was working in the K-12 sector for what used to be a .com. So if you go back to the .com days, I was with PowerSchool.com, which has just grown massively like over the last 20 years. And then Pearson, and then Apple. PowerSchool got acquired by Apple in 2001. And then I was with another startup that got acquired by Apple in 2015.
Well, I'm curious. So in order to get all this information on the conferences that you guys kind of go through to determine if it's going to be a valuable one to attend, what kind of tools and technologies are you using? Or is most of this, do you have people on your team that are giving you insight, or are you yourself using various platforms to kind of understand better who's going to be at this conference and what those personas are?
Yeah, team and customers, right? So we'll ask some of our customers that have been around for a long time, what conferences they go to, what conferences they've heard of, and try to get feedback. It's funny. Sometimes there are regional spinoffs of conferences. Like you'll have the big national conference, but then there'll be regional groups that get together. And you see that a lot in public sector, because in public sector, people aren't allowed to leave the state for travel a lot of times, which is really interesting because a lot of these regional conferences will actually have more decision makers than, particularly if you're doing ABM, so in our case, we might be targeting a university system in Missouri, let's say. Well, a lot of those folks just don't have budget to go to Vegas or Orlando, right? And it's probably not a good look either, especially with the way budgets are right now, to go to a conference in Hawaii. So St. Louis it is, and they all show up. And beyond that, they are really appreciative of the vendors that make it to those smaller conferences. So that's a good way to build goodwill, is to, and you don't have to spend a ton of money. You can, I used to do what I call like the smoke jumper kit. Right. So, you got a pop-up banner, a tablecloth, and some flyers that you jam into your carry-on. You show up, you got a table, you got a pop-up banner, and that's all you really need at a conference. I think a lot of times people get hung up on having the biggest, baddest, most exciting booth. But what you have to remember is people go to conferences to have fun. And the way people go to connect with other people, that's the way that they're really going to have the most fun, is the after parties, right? Is in the exhibit hall, getting to know people, connecting with people. So, if you're going to spend all this money to go to a conference, right? No matter the size, you're going to fly yourself out there, spend all this time away from working the phone or doing typical sales or my day-to-day job as a marketer. You got to make the most of it. And people forget the basics, which is why, like, every single conference, I don't care how long you've been with the company, we have like conference boot camp before we go to a conference. And I walk them through the basics. No standing behind the table, right? You're on your feet. You're not on your phone, right? Your phone is in your laptop bag, right? And, the rules say don't go out into the hallway, break the rules until somebody tells you that you're breaking the rules, right? Go out there, you stop people in their tracks and force them to have that conversation, because people don't want to talk to you, but they actually do want to talk to you.
They just don't want to initiate the conversation.
Yeah. They don't think they want to talk to you, right? So they're going to avoid eye contact. They're going to walk fast, right? They've got someplace they've got to go. But when you stop them and engage them, and if you are authentically interested in getting to know that person, they will be glad that they stopped and talked to you. 9 times out of 10, they're glad that they stopped. So you really got to get out of your comfort zone. I always tell my team, you have to become somebody else, right? So we are doing a radical ego transformation when we go to conferences. And I'm normally an introvert, right? So when I pop on, I become this alternative version of myself where I am, very much out there, very excited to meet people. And the funny thing is, I'm just like the people at the conference. I actually enjoy going to conferences once I'm there. I dread it beforehand. Mm-hmm. Once I'm there, it's pretty great.
Yeah, you get in the groove and then things start flowing. You have a good time. Yeah, I've definitely experienced the same. But Paul, I think what you mentioned is really interesting for the space that you're in, where given how regional things are. And so if there's a certain customer that you are looking to engage with, sounds like you can go to a conference that's in their region, in their area, and there's a very, very likely chance that they'll be there, giving you the opportunity to sell directly to them in person. I think that's really interesting. And I think that sounds pretty unique for the industry that you're in compared to others where, their HQ might be somewhere in the country, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to go to a conference near that.
Yeah. It depends on your budget and the size of the company and kind of where you're at in your company and product's life cycle, right? So for the company I'm with now, we're pretty well established. We've been around for 20 years. We're a big name. So we go to the big conferences. We have to, right? But if I'm a startup, if we're just trying to break into a new market, right, with a new idea, I might skip the big national conference. I really would. In fact, I have, right? Because you're going to blow your budget on this one thing and you're going to be in the back corner, right? Not the best spot, right? In a tiny 10 by 10, you're not going to be able to buy and ship a giant, booth display. So probably a couple pop-up banners. And so is that like the best use of your conference money? Instead, go to a regional conference, right? It's going to have like a fraction of the attendance, but everybody who's there is going to be really engaged, right? They're going to be thrilled that you're there, and they're going to stop by every single booth, right? And there may only be, anywhere from 10 to 20 different vendors that you're competing with for attention. So yeah, I'm a huge fan of the small regional conferences, but you got to do it cheap, right? So think about the smoke jumper approach, fly one person out there. And then, you talk about the 3 stages. The 3 stages are really important. You can't just show up to a conference and expect to get like maximum value from it. So we like to, for my people who have served in the military out there, we like to say we prep the battlefield or prep the landing area. So before you show up, a campaign, right? If you can get a list beforehand, but even if not, find some data enrichment tools out there. There's all kinds of AI tools now. You can go out, build your own list and write a personal message to the people that are going to the conference, right? Target personas, target titles, say, hey, I'm going to be at this conference. I would love to meet you. Keep it short and sweet. Let them know you've got an awesome booth prize and have them stop by. And so they at least have because you're going to get a bunch of those, they'll have a mental hook. And so they see your brand name. And I'll tell you guys the secret to my success. Probably the biggest thing that we do is we splurge on booth prizes. We splurge it because here's the thing, if you're going to spend all this money to go to a conference, right, you really want to make sure that you're successful while you're there. And having a killer booth prize, and you only need one, is a way to do it. And so I won't give away what our super secret prize is because I don't want to
ask. Up to your next conference just to win the prize.
Yeah, you guys would be stoked to see what we give away because people always are. They see it, their eyes light up, they freeze, and they're like, I got to get in on this, right? So, I'm not saying spend thousands of dollars. It doesn't have to be that much money, but it can be something nostalgic. It could be something fun. It could be something that rekindles joy. And then it doesn't have to be related to your company or product at all. If it is, it's better. But find something that will make people go, wow, that is exciting. That is cool, right? And they will seek you out. And even if they don't, when they stop, they'll remember that you sent them that message beforehand and they'll make the connection. So prep the battlefield, right? Of course, do the same on LinkedIn and social networks. And just, use all your channels to let everybody know where you're going to be. If you have a company newsletter, let all your customers know you're going to be there. They'll help amplify the voice. The other thing you can do before conferences is, if you don't already have a campaign to encourage your current customers to speak at conferences and do other things, then you should.
Interesting.
Because, it's free marketing. It's great for the customer because they're elevating their brand. They've got a session, right? There's people coming. You can promote them, right? And just by the fact that and it doesn't have to be a joint presentation with the company.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They're doing their own thing. And your product or service might be a small part of the larger presentation. Doesn't matter. You've got that connection. You promote it for them. So you amplify that. Now you've got a session that you can put into your pre-conference email campaigns and encourage people to show up. And so that's one more thing that you're adding to the show.
Are you recording these at the show, these presentations?
If it's allowed. A lot of conferences, they have pretty strict rules about that, but I always try to break the rules and then ask for forgiveness later, right? The worst thing that's going to happen is you're going to get a killer video. You're going to get it uploaded to your YouTube. You'll have it up for a month, and then they'll tell you to take it down, right? That'll be the end of it. But in most cases, they won't.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's a great tip though, Paul, and it allows you to kind of the customer to benefit by, they're promoting and showing the world what they're doing. But also at the same time, your company can gain from that as well. And that partnership will strengthen. So I really like that idea. The last thing I want to touch on here before we move to kind of during the conference stuff is I think it was really interesting what you mentioned about prepping the battlefield and doing that research beforehand to get the data enrichment to understand who's going to be there. Can you walk us through in detail kind of what that process looks like for you and maybe what tools you're using for that?
Yeah. So we recently came across a tool called Bardeen, and it's pretty great. It actually operates as a browser plugin, which is pretty unique. But it has a visual workflow builder that has integrations. So it can do a lot. It can do a lot. We also have a team of data analysts that just go out and find people as well, kind of old school style, scraping websites. But even with what they come up with, we use Bardeen, right, to kind of enhance that tool. We also lean on Popl quite a bit for this. That's more at conference, right? Where that data enrichment happens, which is such a huge upgrade that you guys have rolled out. That's helped us a lot. Yeah.
That's a great transition into the next segment here, Bryce. Do you want to take kind of middle of the conference activities?
Yeah. And just one last question. So you're using a lot of military analogies here. Paul, do you have a military background?
No, but I have a lot of friends who served, and I have great sympathy and admiration for everybody who served. Plus, a lot of their training and knowledge has so many like real world applications. So I'm a student of military, but I am not a former service member. I was a teacher. Does that count as public service?
Absolutely. Yeah.
I was in the trenches teaching fourth grade for a while. So
yeah, man, that's cool. Well, so we'll move on to the next phase here, which is the day of the conference or the days of the conference. And to start here, I want to ask what are you responsible for at the show? Sounds like you are kind of the orchestrator here, the architect of making sure everything runs smoothly, you achieve your goals. So what does that look like for you?
Yeah. So I have the advantage of being the one-man band for marketing and the way that our company is set up right now. So I'm doing all the events management, but I'm also the director. And so I have some authority in directing like how and what people will do when they get to conferences. And I think that's really important. So the first step is you might need help setting up the booth, right? So I love to get the team beforehand. For conference planning for me, I am really into details and planning, right? So I need everybody's flight numbers before they come in, right? What time they're getting in, where they're staying, everybody's cell phone numbers. So I get all the critical details for everybody on the team. We have a pre-conference meeting too. If they can show up in time and help set up the booth, that's always great. And then we have one the morning of, right? And that is really important for a couple of reasons. One, to revisit the conferences 101, the basics of what we're doing. I make sure everybody understands their specific role in the booth. And depending on the size of the conference and the number of people who are going, everybody's got a different job. And they have very specific jobs. And then I remind them about how we use Popl, right? While we're there. So yeah, we kick off and then we hype them up, right? And so I remind them who's going to be there, why the customers are going to be there, and just try to really get them excited for what's about to happen.
Yeah.
So that's the kickoff meeting. Yeah.
Okay. Nice. And typically, how long do your conferences last? Are these one day or are these multiple day conferences?
Typical conference in higher education, same with K-12, is usually 2 to 3 days.
2 to 3 days. Okay.
Yeah. And, there's two different kinds. There's a kind of conference where you have pretty steady traffic throughout in the exhibit hall. And then there's conferences where like it's a ghost town while everybody's in session, and then you get flooded when everybody shows up at the same time. So you need to have a strategy for how to deal with both. Once we've got the team lined up and everybody's hyped up and they open those doors and people start coming in, it's going to be a massive flood, particularly on day one. So you need to have a plan in place to engage with every single person that walks by your booth. And this is something I learned from a guy named Todd Perry, who's a friend of mine, used to work for Power School years ago. And he has this approach for conferences that is tried and true, and it's never failed me. And that is, it starts with the rule that nobody walks by the booth without engaging the company. And the trick for that is to have something, what we do is to have something we could physically put in people's hands. And so we have this thing that we give away and we get real excited about it. We make a big deal out of it, and it can be anything. It could be a pen. It doesn't really matter what the object is, but as long as you have a story to tell about that object and why it's important, then that's your first pitch, right? So that's hook number one. That gets them to stop in their tracks in the hallway. Typically reach out, and then there's a reaction that people have. They are just programmed to take it from you. Kind of like in New York. Have you ever been to New York? There's people handing out like flyers to a show or whatever. Like you have to fight the urge to take it from them, right? So it's like muscle memory. So they'll stop in their tracks. They'll take the thing from you, and then you might have a story to tell about why that thing is so important, right? For us, it's, high quality this, it's got SPF, and so we really sell that thing, and it becomes a moment. Now we're connecting with somebody and they've got the object. Now you've got their attention, and that's your opportunity to redirect their attention to the booth price. And that's when their eyes light up. They're like, holy smokes, I didn't even see it. And it's amazing. It doesn't matter how big it is. People just, with all the distractions, they won't see it until you point it out to them. And so they're like, that is cool. I'm like, you should enter right now. Like your chances of winning are like 1 in 10. And I just make that number up, but they're like, wow, yeah, I'll go ahead and enter. And that's when they have their first interaction with Popl. And so they have the QR code. Now, at a lot of conferences, people love to use the badge scanners because they're quick and easy, right? Boom, boom, boom. I can just shoot people and get their contact information, but it's so impersonal and it's too fast. And here's what I love about Popl. They scan that QR code, a form comes up. Now they have to stand there for 30 seconds to a minute, filling out that form in front of your booth. And because they're standing there, what ends up happening at a conference is a crowd attracts a crowd. And so people will see, it's like that human nature thing where if you see a line, you just got to stand in it. You don't know what's going on, but you got to stand in that line. It's the same thing. Once people see that there's people standing in front of your booth, they're going to come over and figure out what the heck is going on. And as soon as they realize this giant prize, they're going to scan the QR code too. Right now you've got a crowd of people. And that's step 2. That's the second hook. So hook 1 is getting them to stop. Hook 2 is redirecting to the booth prize. And hook 3 is, can I give you our 30-second pitch? Because you got to remember, like, they don't want to get a whole sales pitch. They don't want to get sucked into a booth and do a thing, so you're taking them on a mini journey, right? Eventually they're going to get to the demo and they're going to love it, right? And they're going to end up spending 10, 15 minutes in your booth talking to a sales rep. But that doesn't just start there, right? You kind of warm them up a little bit. So it starts with hook number 1. Hook number 2 is the booth prize. And hook number 3 is, can I give you my second pitch? And they're going to challenge you. They're going to be like 30 seconds. I'll time you. And of course, your pitch is like a minute. But everybody in the booth should have a pitch memorized, right? Something that they can be real excited about. And it's the energy. Now, when people go to conferences, they're going to forget almost everything you tell them. They're going to forget what the product does. They're going to forget your name. They're going to forget everything, right? But they will remember the vibe. They will remember how you made them feel while they were in your booth. And so that is the number one thing you have to do with people is get them hyped up, build that relationship, and have fun with them while they're there. Remember, the primary reason that people go to conferences is to network and have fun and meet other people. And so that's what you're doing. So that's our little journey in the booth, right? Once they've scanned that, you've done your 30-second pitch. Now we're separating the wheat from the chaff, right? Chaff. People who are actually interested, they didn't know they were interested, but they just heard your pitch and they're like, that sounds really cool. You move them over to the demo station. You get them in front of your account executive and they do the 5-minute demo, right? And answer all their questions. Everybody else, they're not for you, right? So what this approach does when we go to a conference is we leave with the maximum number of leads possible. Yes, we're casting the widest possible net. Yes, we're capturing a lot of people who won't end up being qualified leads, right? But we are capturing everybody who could be a possible lead, right? We're capturing everyone who will become a qualified lead. So cast that wide net. And here's the thing too, with everybody else, you put them in a nurture campaign, you can send them updates about your latest white paper or webinar you have going on. And even if they're like an entry-level analyst, just starting out in their career, someday they'll get promoted, right? People move around a lot. So, don't discount anyone is what I'd say.
Well, so I mean, so many different threads we can go down here, Paul. It makes sense now why you put your team members through these trainings, because you have this whole flow, these series of steps that they go through when they're engaging with the people at the conference. And I like that you're involving psychology at the different levels, how to engage people, how to get them hooked. And so I think that's really insightful. I guess I'm curious, are there any challenges that you find your team consistently faces when you're at the conference? Things that you're maybe trying to overcome or things that you're trying to work on as a team or things that you wish there was a solution to that you're not aware of these days?
Yeah. So high volume is always a challenge, right? Kind of like I mentioned on day one, when they first open those doors and you've got 40, 50 people in front of your little 10 by 10, how are you going to stop all those people? This is your one chance to get them. So having that thing that you can hand out and just boom, 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 hit people with that thing, and you'll stop them for a moment and they'll turn and look at the booth and see the prize, right? So that is the way that we capture that maximum number of people when we hit those periods of high traffic. The other thing is, I mentioned earlier that ability that you guys have now to scan badges and use AI to do data enrichment. It's been huge for us during those moments. So when we don't have a chance to tell everybody to fill out the form, right? And, they might we can just scan their badge quickly. We can just grab them on the go, and capture that information as they walk by.
Got it.
Yeah.
For your team in particular, is the goal, I know you mentioned the goal is to have them do a demo. Is that sort of like, what's the end goal? Where are you looking to, do you want to get them into an email campaign? Do you want to schedule a follow-up demo? Like what is the ideal outcome from those series of steps that your team members go through?
Yeah, meeting, right? A 30-minute demo, right? To get a demo with the whole committee, right? Who's deciding on the new software. So getting them in the pipeline, right? So we're really focused on conversion. So I'm measuring conferences but ultimately I'm measured on how much marketing generated pipeline we create. So that's our goal, is to get these people into their journey, to start the meetings with the sales reps. I should say, so we have two different types of leads at conferences. We have the people I mentioned before that aren't qualified. And then we have people that step up for a demo and ask questions. And so that's where, a second great challenge that we have, particularly when it gets busy, is how do I flag hot leads, right? How do I put in those notes? And for that, we use Popl. And again, I've got my team, everybody's got their assignment. I have everybody in the booth logged into the same person in Popl. We have a general events account that we use. And so no matter where you are in the booth, you have access to all the leads, and you can edit and put in notes for all of the leads that come in. Yeah. And so even if it's really, really busy, I'll tell them just to put in hot leads. So the moment that person steps away, they've got Popl on their phone, they open it up, it's right at the top of the list, and they just type in hot lead. So then when we're done, the reps know that they need to follow up those people immediately. And those people get routed directly to our account executives. Everybody else might go into a follow-up post-conference marketing campaign.
Got it. And this is kind of taking us to that post event part of the flow. But the last thing I want to touch on here, are you guys ever booking meetings with the lead right then and there on the conference floor? You are? Yeah. What does that flow look like? Like what calendar scheduler are you using, and how do you kind of go through the flow to actually book that demo?
So a couple of years ago, we used Calendly for that, right? And we had teams assigned to each account executive. And so the way the jobs work, so at our big conference, we might have 6 people in the booth working on, we'll have like a 10 by 20. And so we have, hook number 1, right? We have people on the front line out in the hallway, like handing out our thing and roping everybody in. They do hook 1, they do hook 2, and direct everybody to the big booth prize. They get them to fill out the form, and then they give them the 30-second pitch. If they advance through that Stargate, we then move them over to a demo station where we have an account executive ready, right, to do a demo. And with that person is a note taker. And so we have somebody that will stand beside or behind the account executive, listen to the conversation, and write in Popl, enter a bunch of notes as that demo is going on.
So while it's happening, someone else is kind of there taking notes on the interaction. Is that what you're saying?
That's exactly right. Yeah. Because the account executive is too busy. They hardly get a chance to get a drink of water, at these conferences. They're just doing demo, one after the other. So having a wingman there, wing lady, to take notes and log the conversation is immensely helpful post-conference. Because, just like all the attendees will forget everything that you told them in the booth, the account executives will forget everybody who came by. Right. And so they'll sort of remember somebody from this company or this organization. I think it was Dave, but having those notes, boom, everything comes flooding back. And now when they do their outreach, they have all these mental hooks that they can extend out to the customers. That the customer makes that connection, is more likely to engage.
So can you walk us through the lineup of the players that you have on the team here? Because you mentioned the wing person, you've got the salesperson, and we've spoken to other conference leaders who bring a product leader, or their job is not to sell, but they represent another portion of the company, and customers appreciate that. So who are you bringing to conferences, and how does that dynamic work?
For smaller conferences, we try to go lean. And so I have, if it's a conference of like 3,000 or less, it'll be 2 people working, and they'll be very busy while they're there. And they will shift roles, right? They'll go between hooking people in with the booth giveaway, and doing demos. But one of those 2 will be an account executive, and that will be the person primarily responsible for doing the in-depth demo. they will both be capable of doing the 30-second pitch, obviously. And so we have a lot of those types of conferences, because I mentioned earlier, we go to a lot of regional shows.
Mm-hmm.
So for most of all those conferences, we send our sales team, right? So we'll send a BDR and the account executive to go, or in some cases, 2 account executives. For bigger conferences above 3,000, we'll send a team. And primarily sales, one person from marketing, usually myself or, one of my teammates, will go sales team. And then, we'd like to have somebody from the development team or the CS team. It's always a huge hit, particularly if customers are going to be there, because these are their favorite people, right? They love connecting with the CS people. So having a champion in the booth, and in terms of what their job is in the booth, those are really good note takers.
Yeah.
Right. Because they're standing with the account executive. If it's a developer and you have somebody really technical come up to the booth and ask those technical questions, your developer's right there ready to answer.
And they're not being, I guess, held accountable to MQLs like your sales or marketing people are, right?
Right. Yeah. But I watch them pretty closely. They have work to do. So they need to be out in, the hallway if they're doing that job, or really participating in the note taking. But once you get your team hyped up at a conference, everybody and they understand their job. And that's the biggest thing. Once people understand their job, they'll take to it. People love direction. They love to know exactly what they're responsible for and what they're supposed to do. So if you give them clear guidelines and you give them goals, and that's really important. So before you go to a conference, you want to have a goal in terms of the number of booth visitors, the number of leads that you get. And so each day at the conference, you update everybody, or throughout the day, we're up to 300 or 290. We got to get 10 more to hit a goal for the day.
Yeah.
And they'll really go for it, So people like that.
Paul, do you have team-wide goals and also individual, each, AE or each salesperson, needs to do this many demos, or is it just at the team-wide level?
Just at the team level. Yeah. Braid is a team. So
Bryce, do you want to take us into the final section here?
Yeah. So I think, we talked about before your event. We just talked in depth about during your event, and they're all very important, right? You can't say that one is more important than the other. What we have noticed about post-event is this idea of speed to lead, right? You put in all this time and effort and budget to go to the event. Everyone talked to people. They put on their new persona to do that. And now you have this whole pipeline of potential new business. Tell us about speed to lead, what you guys are doing to take advantage of everybody that you met and how you act on them quickly.
Yeah. So most important is, you're still at the conference. You're right there. So if you're talking to somebody and you have a connection, think they could be a really great customer, what are you doing later? Do you have any after parties that you're going to? Do you have plans tonight? And even if you don't have your own after party, team's going out to dinner, you should join us, right? Keep them involved as much as possible, right? Get them while they're there, start to build that relationship. If they're not going for that, at a minimum, have the account executive send an immediate email. And there again, having those notes in Popl, right? Make it really easy at the end of the day. And the team is exhausted, right? Here's the thing. It's after a day on your feet, talking to hundreds of people, everyone's wiped out. But the sales rep will make the effort, particularly if you encourage them and point them to the right person. Just send a quick email. It was great chatting with you today. And that's really unusual, right? For most companies, they have to enrich their list and they do all this. And then you hear from companies 3 to 7 days after the conference. And so this is your opportunity to have that primacy effect and make that first impression with people and reinforce that mental hook into your company. Is encourage the reps to send a note same day with their hot leads. Everybody else, it's really going to come down to getting that list up to speed, ready to go. And that's where having it integrated with Salesforce, having Popl integrated with Salesforce is a huge benefit as well, because the leads are already in there. We nurture them, boom, do a campaign day one after the conference. So when people are on the planes heading home, your email shows up in their inbox.
Yeah.
If you wait any longer after a conference, you're going to be one of hundreds of emails that these people are going to get. Being, it's just like first to market, right? Being first to respond post-conference is critical.
Yeah. I imagine because people are physically exhausted, their vocal cords hurt, their feet hurt, they just want to lay down and probably have a drink. It sounds like that is just naturally going to be a challenge to that phase of the process. So whether it's technology to make it easier or incentives, structure around your sales process, is there anything that you found works well to encourage that same day or immediate next day follow-up?
It's interesting you mentioned incentive. And what I've learned is if you're doing conferences improperly, you're going to need incentives to get your team to do what they need to do, right? If you're doing conferences the right way, they won't need any extrinsic incentives because they will deeply understand how important that conference is for their success, right? They have their own quota. They have their end of year KPIs that they have to meet, and they will deeply understand that they have to do well at this conference to meet that quota, right? So it shifts from being a marketing exercise to a sales exercise, right? They own it, right? Their success or failure is in their hands, right? I'm just setting them up for success as best as I can. But to your point, sorry, go ahead.
You got it, Paul. You got it.
Yeah, I was going to say, to your point, though, about people being tired after conferences, what I'll say is I am endlessly impressed and blown away by people's ability to rally at conferences, both, on the team and with customers. I mean, we have one coming up here in a few weeks. It's in New Orleans, right? Great city for a conference, but tough too, if you know what I mean. And they open the doors at 7 a.m. So, and yeah, it's going to be a hugely successful conference. So yeah, people find a way.
Yeah, brings out the trooper in everybody.
I love, Paul, that you're leading with why, right? If you're doing incentives and you're relying on those, then sort of the underlying reason for doing something is probably lacking. And so if you can really clarify why we're here at this conference, then, and people understand that and can resonate with that, then the incentives, it'll handle themselves.
Yeah.
But so can you talk about, again, in this, considering the post-event phase we're in here, talk about how you break down the success of an event. What are specifically the metrics that you and your team are looking at?
Yeah. So there's really two KPIs that we use to measure success for a conference. And then there's an intangible third one, which is probably most important or just as important as the first two. And the first is just the number of leads. And so whether it's just cold leads, I should say as an aside, we have two different buckets of MQLs. We have regular MQLs, which I'll call cold leads. Those go to me. Those go into my nurture campaigns, right? We wait for them to become something. Our hot leads are called MQL plus, and those are people that are ready to get into the pipeline and start getting worked by the account executives. So we have targets for both, and they're based on the number of attendees at the conference. We try to get 10% of a conference just to stop by the booth, right? So that's our overall number. And then a percentage of that for MQL and MQL plus. Beyond that, we have pipeline. And so, that's a lagging indicator. It can take as long as a year, particularly it depends on sector, right? In our sector in higher education, our sales process timeline could be 12 to 18 months, right? From the time of discovery, getting budget allocated, going through the process, RFPs, right? It's an ongoing thing. So ultimately pipeline is the second KPI we use. And so we will measure the success of a conference based on the amount of pipeline generated. And that's a big part of me determining in the following year whether or not we're going to go back to that conference, right? We could leave a conference with a ton of leads, but if it doesn't generate any pipeline, then it's not really worth being there.
And we'll get into that third point. I have one quick question on the pipeline. What's the calculation using to get a monetary value? I assume you're using a monetary value for pipeline. What does that calculation look like for you guys? It's
the deal, right? So the contract proposal we put together for each of our customers. So they might be looking at one of our products. They might be looking at two of our products. We, like most companies in higher education, do pricing based on full-time student enrollment or, faculty enrollment or, research funding expenditures. So there's a whole bunch of factors that go into this calculator that we have, but it's the amount of the deal.
And you're calculating deal amount on a opportunity by opportunity basis. You're not saying here's our average contract value across our business and just applying that to the number of leads that come in.
Yeah, we have to. I mean, because it varies widely, right? If you're a small community college with, take Harvey Mudd, for example. I think they've got 1,000 students or less at Harvey Mudd in California versus like ASU, right? Which has 40,000 students. So yeah, the price varies.
Yeah.
So.
Makes sense. And then we got to hear about that third one that's less tangible, but equally important.
Well, yeah. So that's just the third one is the brand, right? So what was the vibe, right? Who won the conference? And that's a great way to think about conferences too. I'm inherently competitive by nature. I think a lot of people are. And so when I go to a conference, I walk around on the exhibit floor, I view my competition, right? And I am really determined to win the conference. Yeah, I want to make sure that we have the best vibe, the best experience, and people remember us the most of everybody that went to that show. Like that's my number one goal, is to make the biggest impression. And I'll just leave with this is, there's sometimes things happen, right? You get to a conference and your booth didn't show up, right? It's happened to every company at least once. It's, as a marketer, it's like my worst nightmare, right? You get there and there's no booth. It's just you and you got a table with a black curtain behind you, and what do you do? And I've prepared, and that's part of my pre-conference meeting that I do with all my teams. Like if something like that happens, here's the plan. And the plan is you. You are there, and you have to remember that people go to conferences to connect with you. And I'll be honest, sometimes those are my best conferences. It defies logic, right? Your booth doesn't show up. You don't have your prize. But what you do the night before is you go print out that QR code, right? And you go find a prize, right? Go to Best Buy, go to Target, find something wacky, splurge, right? Get a Uber XL and cart that giant thing into your booth so that it takes up the entire table, whatever it is. And that's your booth giveaway. And people will say, what happened? Where's it? So you explain your booth didn't show up. But it's the energy you bring to the conference that will leave a lasting impression. That is the number one driver of leads at conferences, is your willingness to step up and engage with people who go to conferences.
At the end of the day, it's you who's there, and you know what the goal is, and that's all you need. And then I guess a good booth prize as well. So that's cool.
So Paul, do you mind if we do a special segment that comes from one of our sponsors?
Yeah, let's go for it.
Yeah. All right. So the sponsor of today's episode is Popl. Popl does lightning fast lead capture. And so it's only fitting that they sponsor the lightning round. And the way this goes is we're going to ask a series of questions. You can answer super quick with no explanation, or feel free to give more context, and we'll dive into it.
Let's do it. The first one, Paul, is what is your most memorable conference experience?
I've got two. I'll go with this one. So in the year 2000, during the .com era, our tagline for PowerSchool back then was "Where education clicks," right? Because of the mouse click. This was kind of a new idea. So whoever was in charge of marketing at the time, I think that might have been Jennifer Harrison back in the day. She came up with this idea to get these little clickers. You use them to train dogs, right? And we had our logo printed on one side, and we told people at the top of every hour, just click that clicker, and then we're going to find somebody in the conference hall and give them a prize. And this was at our big national show, right? So there are tens of thousands of people running around the exhibit hall, and every hour at the top of the hour, it was like a swarm of crickets would just take over the entire, and they're it was so incredibly noisy. People still talk about it to this day, and we got scolded. We actually had to stop handing out those clickers because it was so disruptive to the exhibit hall. Everybody, all the other vendors were pissed. So yeah, we won that conference.
I was going to say, that sounds like you definitely won. And I love the kind of viral nature of that giveaway, and that it just makes everyone aware of something's going on. Who's the source of this? So that's great. Okay, next question. It's the year 2075, and we're at a conference. What do you think it looks like? What are people doing?
I'm going to be over 100, but hopefully I'm spry and still do 100 push-ups.
We time traveled from today to the conference. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. So in 2075, I think about the future a lot, especially with all this stuff happening with AI. I don't know that we're going to have a lot of software companies anymore, to be honest. I feel like it'll just be us interacting with AI, doing a lot of the things that we used to rely on apps for. If we have a phone, it'll just be something that we talk to or interact with. I don't know that we're going to be launching apps. And so I think as technology improves and VR becomes more like the holodeck on Star Trek, there's going to be a real appetite for human experiences and a premium on human expression. And so a lot of the companies and vendors that will be selling products in the future will be selling things of that nature, analog experiences. And so conferences will become even more coveted, right? I think a lot of people think of the future and conferences in the future as becoming more virtual, less in person. I think the opposite is true.
Yeah.
I really do. I think those are going to be our rare opportunities to interact and actually go hang out with real people in person. And so I expect attendance for conferences to go up. In the exhibit hall, it's hard to imagine what products of the future will look like. I think, as I said before, they'll really focus on the human experience. And I think the exhibit hall will reflect that. There'll be a lot of tactile, touch, smell, sight, physical things that you can do in the exhibit hall. And I think there'll be a lot of retro stuff as well, but all packaged in a way that talks about the future, because like all conferences, the point is to talk about what the future looks like.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I think. I don't know.
Amazing. That's very deep. I like that. All right. Last question for the lightning round is, what is your best tip or lesson learned that you can pass on to other people who manage events?
I think kind of what I said before, right? People go to conferences to have fun, right? This is their one chance to get out of the office and, go learn something, of course. But the number one reason they're there is to interact with people, experience a new part of the country, experience something new, and get to know some new people. And so keep that in mind when you go to conferences and get yourself out of your comfort zone, force people to stop to interact with you. There are going to be awkward moments where people don't want to, and it's awkward and they're like, they just walk away and look at you like you're crazy. You just got to brush that off. Because for every one of those, there'll be 10 others that you have a really pleasant conversation with. So yeah, I guess the way that I would summarize that is be prepared for no booth, right?
Yeah.
Be mentally prepared for no booth. Assume that your booth isn't going to be there, right? And it's just you. And if you're ready for that, you're ready to do really well at a conference.
Yeah, that is a great tip to sort of round everything out. It's sort of like, it's almost like a prepare for the worst mentality, right? Prepare for no booth. And if you do that well, then whatever does end up happening, you're going to be successful.
Yeah. If the booth shows up, that's just icing, right? That's just extra gravy for you, because you were already going to do great. Now you're going to do even better. Huh?
Exactly. Awesome. Well, Paul, this has been amazing. We've learned so much from you today. Before we wrap things up, we want to give you the chance to shout out anything professionally, personally, and just kind of from your brand.
Gosh, I don't know, guys. If people are interested in learning more or want to connect, I'm on LinkedIn like everybody. You can find me on there. Current company I work for is named Kuali. I'm not sure I mentioned that. That might be important.
Yeah. We'll have that in the intro.
Yeah. My CEO might be kind of miffed if I did a podcast and didn't mention the company. Kuali's great. What else? I'm on Blue Sky. You can find me on Blue Sky. And yeah, that's probably it. Yeah, this was fun, guys. Like I said, I love talking about conferences, so I was happy to help out here.
Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks for that, Paul. We appreciate all the great insight. We learned a ton. I'm sure the listeners did too. Thanks for joining us today, and we'll see everyone soon.